The lights in the briefing hall dimmed, and Instructor Vash tapped his data slate. Sit. Watch. Learn what happens to species who think courage is enough. I was 17 cycles into my first year at the Coalition Officer Academy, one of maybe 200 humans scattered among 11,000 cadets from 31 member species. We weren't popular. Earth had joined the coalition only 4 years earlier, dragged in as a developing protectorate after first contact went about as smoothly as a car crash. Every lecture about warfare, every tactical seminar, seemed to circle back to one lesson: humans don't understand real war. Humans got lucky. Humans need to be humbled. That's what this footage was supposed to do. The screen flickered to life. Grainy combat recording, time-stamped 11 years back, some border skirmish on a mining colony called Ridgepoint Station that I'd never heard of. A coalition peacekeeping unit, Vashani troops, based on the four-jointed arms, pinned down in a trench system by an unknown hostile force. The audio was garbled, mostly screaming and weapons fire. Observe, Vash said, how quickly organized defense collapses under sustained assault. This is why doctrine matters. This is why improvisation gets people killed. The footage showed the Vashani line breaking. Soldiers scattering. And then, in the corner of the frame, barely visible through smoke, a lone figure in mismatched armor, dragging two wounded Vashani troopers by their harnesses, moving backward into a firing position instead of running. I sat up straighter. Next to me, Priya Anand, the only other human in my cohort, sharp as broken glass and twice as unforgettable, went very still. Wait, she said, quietly. Rewind that. Vash frowned. This is not a discussion segment, Cadet Anand. Rewind it. Please. Something in her voice made him do it. The figure appeared again, this time from a better angle. Torn jacket. No helmet. Dark hair plastered to a bloody forehead. And even through 11 years of compression artifacts, even through the chaos, I recognized the face. So did Priya. Her hand found my arm and gripped hard enough to bruise. That's my uncle, she whispered. That's Dennis Anand. The hall went dead silent, the way a room does when a few hundred alien students realize something has shifted that they don't yet understand. Explain, Vash said, and for the first time in 17 cycles, I heard something other than condescension in his voice. Priya stood. Her chair scraped like a gunshot. My uncle was a cargo pilot. Independent contractor. He disappeared for 8 months when I was 9 years old. My family was told he died in a shipping accident near the perimeter. We had a funeral. We had a funeral for a man with no body, because the insurance company said re-entry fires don't leave much. She pointed at the screen, at the frozen image of a man none of us had known was a soldier. That is not a shipping accident. Vash pulled up the metadata with shaking claws, actual shaking. I'd never seen a Vashani do that. This footage is classified under a data sharing agreement with the Ridgepoint garrison. It was provided as generic training material. I was told no identifying information. Play the rest of it, I said. He hesitated. Then he played it. What followed wasn't 11 minutes of a species proving humans get lucky. It was 11 minutes of one man holding a collapsing trench line together with nothing but stubbornness and a salvaged rifle, dragging 6 wounded soldiers to cover one at a time while an enemy nobody in that room could identify tried to overrun the position. He wasn't in the coalition military. He wasn't trained for this. He was a cargo pilot whose ship had apparently been forced down in the middle of somebody else's war, and instead of running, he'd stayed. The footage ended with him collapsing against a support beam, chest heaving, 3 Vashani medics working over him while he waved them off towards someone worse hurt. The timestamp cut out there. No resolution. No confirmation of what happened after. Priya's voice had gone very small. We were told he died in an accident. Nobody told my family he was alive 11 years ago, fighting in someone else's war, saving people who weren't even his own species. It took 4 days to get answers, and it took a human, Priya, refusing every polite deflection from the academy administration, to get them. Dennis Anand had survived Ridgepoint Station. The garrison commander, a Vashani officer named Tresek, had filed a full report praising an unregistered human civilian who'd organized a fighting retreat that saved 41 coalition lives. The report had been buried, not out of malice, but bureaucratic indifference, a footnote about an alien nobody important, filed under a colony most of the coalition had never heard of, in the years before Earth mattered enough for anyone to cross-reference the name. He'd been treated for his wounds, debriefed, and quietly repatriated 8 months later through a diplomatic channel nobody had bothered informing his family existed. The paperwork trail showed he'd tried, twice, to contact Earth authorities about what happened. Both messages had been lost in the same tangle of pre-membership bureaucracy that lost everything about humans back then, because who double-checks the mail from a species that doesn't have a seat at the table yet? He is 58 years old now. Retired. Living outside Sacramento. Nobody at the academy had known his niece was standing in their classrooms. Priya called him that night. I was there, technically not supposed to be, sitting on the floor of her dorm room while she held the comm slate with both hands like it might vanish. Uncle Dennis, she said, and her voice cracked on the second syllable. It's Priya. The pause on the other end lasted 3 full seconds. Then, Priya. Baby, is that, how are you calling me from space? She laughed and cried at the same time, and I looked away to give her something like privacy in a room with no walls between us. Instructor Vash showed the footage again 2 weeks later. Different context this time. He didn't dim the lights and talk about humbling anyone. This is Dennis Anand, he said instead, and the room, full, silent, listening, watched a civilian pilot hold a line that professional soldiers had broken from. He was never a soldier. He had no obligation to that trench, that colony, or any of the people in it. Species with 1,000 years more warfare than humanity broke and ran. He did not. He looked at me and Priya, sitting in the 3rd row like we hadn't spent 17 cycles being talked down to. I used this footage to teach a lesson about the limits of instinct over doctrine. I was wrong about which lesson it taught. He paused. Doctrine keeps armies alive. But something in that man decided 41 strangers were worth more than his own survival, and no curriculum I've ever taught explains where that comes from. Nobody laughed. Nobody smirked at the humans in the back anymore. 6 months later, Dennis Anand stood at a podium at the Academy's founding ceremony, older and grayer than the footage, wearing a jacket with a coalition service ribbon he'd waited 11 years to be given. Priya stood beside him. I stood beside her. They showed my footage to scare kids into respecting doctrine, he said into the silence. Turns out doctrine's not what won that fight. He looked out at 200 human cadets, and 11,000 who weren't. We just don't leave people behind. Try teaching that in a classroom.